Hi. To help with the homework questions, I want to just go over some of the terminology so that it's clear. Firstly, you'll get questions involving right angle triangles. Now, you have these letters to show each corner, where if you were to refer to this side, they call it AB, just using the ends of each side. To refer to this side, they call it BC, or you can also say CB, but they just put it in alphabetical order. And this side you would call AC. So then, if you want to use Pythagoras' theorem, as I've previously put it down, Pythagoras' theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where we call c the longest side in general. We're just using the letter c, but it could be any letter. C just means the longest side, which we also call the hypotenuse. Now, usually the Pythagoras theorem is written like this: a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But if we use the letters the way they have in the questions, a, b, b, c, and ac, the same equation would then become, say, ab squared plus ac squared equals bc squared. See, I'm just replacing the equivalent sides. And the most important thing is that c squared should always be the longest side. So hopefully that would help a little bit more answer questions with Pythagoras. Now let's take a quick look at the trigonometry questions. Remember, the trigonometry, just to quickly summarize, is also for right angle triangles, but in this case there's an angle involved. Now with trig, there is three things you need to know: the sine of theta, the cos of theta, and the tan of theta. And before we cover that, let's look at some terminology. Remember, the longest side is always the hypotenuse, or hype for short, and the side that's opposite to the angle is called the opposite, and the side that's adjacent or next to the angle theta is known as adjacent. Okay, so now there's a little ratio to work out the sine of theta, the cos of theta, and the tan of theta. And remember, there's an acronym of SOHCAHTOA to help us do that. Where the SO means that the sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. The CA means, or the cos of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, and the TOA means that the tan of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. And to work out what theta is, if you know what the sides are, you just do the inverse sine, inverse tan, or inverse cos on the calculator to work it out. Now, let me just go over a slightly tricky part now. What if the angle is not here but is over here? Let's look at what happens. Okay, so what if we have a situation where our angle theta is now up here instead of down there? What happens? How do we do trigonometry questions? Well, in this case, the first thing to recognize is where is the longest side? Well, it's that one over here, and that's the hypotenuse. And the next thing is to look at is what's the opposite side? Well, opposite side is always opposite the angle, so it will be over here. Now they've got the hypotenuse and opposite, that leaves only one side left, which has to be the adjacent. So there's the adjacent side. So I find that when labeling the sides, it's always easier to firstly find the hypotenuse and the opposite side, and the remaining side is the adjacent one. So how does this help us? Now that we know which side is adjacent, opposite, and hypotenuse, then it becomes easier to work out what sine of theta is. Sine of theta is always opposite over hypotenuse. Cos of theta, which is cap, is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tan of theta becomes opposite over adjacent. So once you then work out what these ratios are, you can work out the angle by doing inverse sine or inverse cos or inverse tan on the calculator. And that's how you would tackle that type of question.